Hello and welcome to a special edition of Rod's Tabletop Hoops. Today we're taking a look at Hoop Mania Basketball. No, seriously, we're not taking a look at Hoop Mania Basketball. I previewed that out 2 or 3 years ago, and it's not a very good game. But the reason I have brought it on board is because I'm taking a look at Highlight Maker Hoops Prime Time, a game apparently Keith Avalone spent at least 8 to 10 years developing this basketball game. So this is not just an overnight flash of a basketball game. They came out with their shortened game of Highlight Maker Hoops, which is basically throwing the player cards down and having little face-offs, and the game is completed easily in less than 20 minutes, 15 minutes to 30 minutes, depending on how good you are at it, and it has just basic stats. Well, they've upgraded an installment in the Highlight Maker Hoops Prime Time. And by the way, this box is the cooler box. You can see that image right there. It matches a box, which I will show you. Now this player is taking the ball to the rack. The original box that had the first installment of the shortened version of the game has a Kevin Love looking like guy that's kind of like trying to dribble the ball between his legs, but he's doing a very poor job. This is the cooler box. I paid an extra $15 because I didn't have the first module of this game, but believe me, I'd rather have this guy going in for a slam than that weird looking Kevin Love type character on the other box. So anyway, this is what the box looks like. It's bigger in prime time. It's a full play, long play game. That's the difference between the game 1 and game 2. And I think this is going to be the one that's going to be played the most if you're really a basketball fan and really like a little bit more detail. Now, I took this kind of off the cuff. I watched I'll just call it a darn you Steve Tower video, because every time Steve Tower in Further Review reviews something, it always looks like a better game. And so I looked at it and I just said, wow, he was flying through that game and having a good time. So I said, I've got to get myself an edition of Hoops Primetime Highlight Maker Hoops, and I've never been in the Play games stratosphere here, so this is all new to me. So this is what you get. Mostly, you do not get packets. I got these packets because the cards are very, very small. As you can see, they look like this. They're really not much of anything, but they have characteristics versus statistical ratings, with the exception of free throws, I guess. It's a clank rating there. He misses on 3 and 6. That's George Mikan, one of the true founding fathers of the modern age of pro basketball. So I'm here with the all-time franchise great teams. Voila, there's all-time franchise great teams right there. It's the 30 franchises that exist today, and there's basically a group of all-time greats, the top 12 players on each team. That's 30 teams times 12, which is 360 players. So, and Keith Avalone even puts in a disclaimer within his little letter that's within the all-time Highlight Maker greatest teams that there could be some controversial picks on this, and I will definitely agree with that. We're going to go through the cards today. We're not going to do a gameplay just yet, but we're going to check out some of these individual teams and these individual cards, which are quite amazing. I'm quickly going to take a look, though, at what they call the FACs, or the FAC charts, if you want to call it that, because what you do on every single play is you roll a die. You roll 1 to 6 on your die. Say I got a 6 right there, and it's off the glass. So you work a different, every time you turn a card, you roll a die. So that means this deck is very versatile and doesn't need to be shuffled as much, or even, as Keith Avalone says, maybe not at all in some cases. So you can really fly through that portion of the game. Having said that, you got a lot of rounds of basketball to play. You play it in 4-minute increments. And I'm not going to get too deep into it because, once again, I've only watched a ton of videos. Darn you, Steve Towers' video, and a couple other people have put some things on there. I've spent the last week just organizing my seasons, including just using a little corner rounder to make these cards look a little sharper, because you have to tear out 360 cards, and I have found the R 4mm corner rounder to be a great corner rounder to make these things look kind of sharp and look even more professional than they already look with the color that they have. And I own two of these corner rounding things. Obviously, the English is a little bashed from eBay. I think I paid about $8 or $9 for each one of them. Got them at the same time. One didn't ship, and eventually they both showed up, so it didn't even matter. But it's nice to have a couple of them. My Artool 3-way corner runch, and that's my corner rounder right there. I'll pop it out of the package. This is a nice place to keep all your little flecks when you're taking corners off of cards, but anyway, it kind of looks like that. And you got your R4. That's what I used for the corners on every single one of these cards. This is David Thompson, the Skywalker for Denver. I'm very glad they acknowledged the American Basketball Association at least a little bit. Of course, David played more seasons in the NBA than ABA, but there's an R4, an R7, and an R10. And I've used R7 for PTG cards. I've used R4 for much of the smaller type of cards like that, like those small crunch time cards. I used R10 actually for my crunch time FACs, TACs, timer action cards, whatever you want to call them, and the player cards as well. So I like mostly with normal cards. I'd probably go with R7 most, but I ventured out in the R10 millimeter range for other cards. But either way, a really good tool. And anyway, like I said, I ended up tearing apart all of these cards, followed that up by looking for an envelope that would fit these cards. Now, I've had envelopes for days. I've done videos on envelopes. Well, these cards are so darn small. I mean, they're literally a 1.25 inch by 2.5 inch, something weird like that. So I ended up looking online, and I found these guys right here on Amazon, and Envelux 2.25 by 3.5 inch envelopes, and they also had a little decorative design on them. So even came with a little pen if you wanted to mark them up. So I picked up 100 of these guys so I could do 30 all-time great teams, and they work pretty well. Once again, I got all the corner rounding done, and you can see that's the Utah Jazz all-time greats, originally New Orleans Jazz, of course, and once again, another great franchise that began in 1975. The only thing I came across when I was doing this project was I was going to put my little labeling through my printer on these envelopes. Turns out those envelopes are way too small to fit even the smallest spot on the grabbers for my printer, and I was doing test little papers, and the paper was just spinning out of control and spinning off, or not acknowledging the paper at all because it was so small. So what I ended up deciding to do last night, I went online, and I wanted to find some team logos at least for the 30 teams, and I kept looking at stickers and stuff, but the stickers that were on for sale were all 3 inches and things like that, too big. But I found someone who was selling something like on Etsy, and they showed a picture of all the teams together like this. These were all combined in one fell swoop. And so I copied, pasted it, printed it out on my inkjet printer, cut them all out individually, and then, of course, I corner rounded the edges of each one of them and threw them onto the envelope. So this is not my most professional job of printing. I use Elmer's glue, and I glued them all to the packets. And so I think they look decent, and they definitely represent all the franchises, and I know that they're all-time great teams. I don't need to write on each packet that they're all-time great teams. These are just a special group, and I'll always remember them because of this. I even had the Eastern and the Western Conference ones done, and that serves as the two. There were so many referees. There's like 15 or 30 referees, at least like 25 to 30 referees. And there's Mark Davis, Dick Vavetta, Bennett Salvatore, Richie Powers, classic referees, Monty McCutcheon, Eddie T. Rush, and they're all rated for how they referee a game. Lenient, respected, lenient. You know, you like those ones that are lenient, you're going to get away with more stuff. But anyway, there were so many of them. And these cards, by contrast, are even smaller than the player cards. You can see they're not even in the same ballpark, but you can put these guys on the game board, and that's how there's 3 spots for referees, and every once in a while there's going to be a referee result, and you got to determine if you're going to benefit or not benefit from a call when you play the game. So that's another thing. The other thing about the game, of course, in conjunction with referees, and you'll see virtually no other game with this, is there's a coach's card. Well, let's see. Dick Motta is the coach of the Washington Bullets, Wizards. All of these are the original names. I'm going to be using the Primetime app, and they've got a nice scoring thing, and I've named them the Bullets. I've named the let's see, who else did I change the name for? The Seattle Supersonics are not the Oklahoma City Thunders. I will show you. Oklahoma City is mostly made up of original Seattle Supersonics, including Kevin Durant. But here's a coach's card. That's Dick Motta. And anyway, he's just part of the team, the 13th man, I guess you could say. And there's some real classic coaches in here. And there's certain players that are players and coaches. And that would all include, at a minimum, Houston Rockets. Rudy Tomjanovich is a lifetime Rocket coach. So you'll see a player card and a coach card of Rudy Tomjanovich. Crossing teams, I think there's a Lenny Wilkins who may be the Sonics / Thunder coach. And he's a player with another team, maybe the Hawks. I'm not 100% sure. But it's all in good fun, and it's all really, I like how they develop the teams. There's a few guys that have left out, and I'm going to note that in a few minutes. I'm going to zoom in on a card place and just preview some of the cards. But what I was going to first talk about is the fact that you see this Hoop Mania envelope over here. This isn't here by accident. I picked up this game about 3 years ago from Keith at Big League Company, and it was like $20. And I said, let's give it a shot, and maybe it's 20 plus shipping. And anyway, it's the all-time teams in NBA all-time All-Stars season. So there's a group of All-Stars for some NBA All-Stars, but there's some all-time teams, and I decided to play a game. And as it turns out, that was the only game I ever played. The game has like four or five dice, and it really is an arduous task as you're rolling down and looking up random numbers. But what I wanted to do right here is check out, before I go into some card analysis, what some of the teams look like. And here's the sample that I had. The old Boston Celtics, I think they got a roster here, and they put like 13 or 14 guys on this team. And we're going to check and see how similar this roster is to the primetime roster, and this roster is from about 1978 or 79 or even earlier than that. I'm not even sure. But anyway, you start with Bob Cousy, and that makes entirely a ton of sense. He's Tom Heinsohn, legendary coach, very good player for the Celtics, number retired. Arnie Rison, earlier years player. Satch Sanders. This is before Larry Bird, before the trio of big men that led the Celtics on their rampage in the 1980s, before the Ray Allen and Kevin Garnett years. Satch Sanders, Frank Ramsey, Casey Jones, JoJo White. And you can see the number. It's like 18. Maybe it's 3 dice for this. There's 18. You roll 3 dice and you get 3 through 18 as a number. Obviously, if you get 3 ones, it's a 3, and that's probably a rare number, and there's probably some interesting stuff on there, but they're rated for defense and things. Dave Cowens, this is their all-time greats team. Bill Sharman, certainly a legend. John Havlicek, amazing player. The legendary Bill Russell, and as you can see, I've got Bill Russell out here. There's Bill and his twin all-time great Bill, so that's pretty cool. Russell, Don Nelson. I don't know if I'd consider him an all-time great Celtic, but let's check the other Celtics after we get this one done. Sam Jones was known as Mr. Clutch prior to Jerry West. So anyway, let's break open the Boston Celtics all-time team of Highlight Maker Hoops Primetime and compare it with Hoop Mania. Okay, here we go. There's Bill Sharman. We remember that name. Just hopefully you remembered everything I just came up with. Red Auerbach, the coach. That would be true for any generation of Celtic coaches. Obviously, Red was the man who was on 9 of those 11 championships as coach, and of course he was GM and president when he wasn't doing that, so he gets credit for about 15 or 16 championships. Larry Legend Bird, obviously well past the Hoop Mania time and place. The Coos, of course, Bob Cousy, who I hope he'll be dealing some assists in this game. Dave Cowens, once again, we got Cowens. Hondo Havlicek. Dennis Johnson, see, he had not become a Celtic yet, and he was pretty much just in his formative years with the Seattle Supersonics when that all-time team was made for Hoop Mania. Sam Jones. Easy Ed McCauley. This was an underrated pick by me because I look back in the stats and go, yeah, he threw in some nice 18 to 20 point a game years, and he was actually part of the draft time trade which St. Louis took Ed McCauley and a couple other players, I believe, to get Bill Russell. And verifying that data, Easy Ed McCauley, he was traded with Cliff Hagan for number 1 pick Bill Russell of the University of San Francisco. So, yeah, that changed the whole world of Red Auerbach and the Celtics as soon as they got that defensive dynamo in Bill Russell. And, of course, there's Kevin McHale, fantastic power forward, and the Chief, Robert Parrish, completing the trio, Bird, Parrish, McHale. And, of course, Paul Pierce. I think this is a really good pick. I didn't realize how long he played with the Celtics. A very good player, a very scrappy defensive player. You can actually know that Paul Pierce played a full game. You know, he didn't play just half on offense or defense. I always like that. And there's Bill Sharman again. So there's your Boston Celtics franchise great team with highlight maker hoops. Before I head into a little player analysis, I was just going to say, comparing the Celtics with the all-time rosters of the Buffalo Braves and the Portland Trail Blazers is just quite a joke, because they didn't even come out 2, 4, 6. They only came out with 8 Braves. They couldn't even put 10 Braves together. I know their roster franchise was only 8 years old, but you'd think you could come up with a roster bigger than 8 players. And, of course, Randy Smith, who is on the Clippers roster here. Dick Garrett was kind of a mediocre guard, but still. Don May, Herm Gilliam, Bob Kaufman, Bob McAdoo, and Elmore Smith, and Jim McMillan. There's another good one. So anyway, the Braves were quite thin, but just as thin were my favorite, the Portland Trail Blazers. And they only gave them 7 players. How are you supposed to play an all-time team with just 7 players? I don't understand why they couldn't have just thrown some really bad guys on the team to fill it. And there's Rich Adelman, related to Rick Adelman, I'm certain. Lloyd Neal. Jeff Petrie, spelled with a J. Geoff Petrie. Greg Smith. John Johnson, very solid player. Sid Wicks did create a little controversy in Portland. Just wasn't as good a team players. We was kind of thinking more of a me instead of we. And there's Larry Steele. Everybody loved the Bandit, the first steals leader in NBA history, when they kept him in 74. So anyway, that's Hoop Mania basketball. Once again, I said I had such a disappointing time. I must have had it rung up about 50 or 60 fouls in the game. I could barely even complete the darn game. In fact, I haven't even punched out any of these all-time teams for the rest of the league of Hoop Mania. And I don't even know if there's 5 or 10 teams here. There's the Knicks, the Royals, oh, there's some Cavaliers. Oh, that's the other expansion team. I never went to the Cavaliers. John Johnson's on the Cavaliers and the Blazers. How amazing is that? Supersonics, also a relatively new team. Freddie Brown, Spencer Haywood, a few other guys. Suns with Connie Hawkins, Dick Van Arsdale, chairman of the boards, Paul Silas. And there's your Sixers with one of the first African-American players, and Earl Lloyd. Also George Ratkovitz, which I did not know he was anything special. San Diego / Houston Rockets, Calvin Murphy, Rudy T, an all-time Rocket, Jimmy Walker. And the Chicago Bulls with Jet the Jet, who just passed away this past week, age 84. May he rest in peace. Fantastic driver to the hoop, as far as backing guys in, drawing fouls. Not a fast player by any means, but methodical and perfect for those 1970s Bulls team. And there's the 76ers, and they had Wilt Chamberlain, Hal Greer, Johnny Redker, Dolph Shays. There's plenty more players, but I'm not going to bore you with the Hoop Mania basketball game. Let's get into a review of some of the players on these Highlight Maker Hoops franchise great teams. Okay, hopefully I've zoomed in so people can actually read these cards a little bit. I'm going to just go through the alphabet of teams. So if you know that Atlanta's number one on the clock and Toronto and Washington and Utah are toward the end, you can skip around and go to your favorite team. And I'm just going to let you know off the cuff, without much research, whether these teams have the players necessary, if they are fortified enough to be considered a complete all-time franchise great team in highlight maker hoops. So I'm going to start with the Atlanta Hawks, and I'm going to go through about 6 teams at a time here first, and just kind of run through the players very quickly, and then I'll just calculate in my head if I can think of any other players that might make that team normally. And we got Mookie Blaylock, who was a fantastic 1990s player, definitely deserving. Cliff Hagan, Hall of Famer for sure. Al Horford, modern day player. Well, let's just see how the rest of the roster fills out, because I'm not sure if he's one of the top power forwards or centers, because I'm thinking this team might not. Well, let's keep going. Sweet Lou Hudson, definitely deserving, a fantastic scorer. University of Minnesota. Bob Pettit, one of the greatest living ball players right now. I think he's in his early 90s. Louisiana kid, and he was a super success with the Milwaukee Hawks and the St. Louis Hawks, not the Atlanta Hawks. Doc Rivers, fantastic point guard. We'll see if we have any arguments there. Wayne Tree Rollins, longtime Atlanta center. Not a scorer, but definitely a good team player, rebounder, and shot rejecter. And then you got Dan the Man Roundfield. I was wondering if they had the power forward slot filled. Dan the Man, definitely. Spud Webb, see, that's more of a player you put on a team for not comedic purposes, but just for his place in society. He was like the every man, a 5'7" guy who could actually dunk a basketball and fly. Very exciting player, but I don't know if he's a top 12 for the Hawks. And there's Lenny Wilkens, Hall of Famer as a player and coach, easily makes the top 12. We got Dominique Wilkins, top 75 player, one of the great athletic forwards, fantastic. More fun to watch than many of the players today even. Kevin Willis played forever in the NBA, and I think he deserves a power forward slot. And then there's Mike Fratello, the coach. I don't think I could argue with Mike Fratello. The only guy that's coming to my mind in Atlanta here would be John Drew, because John Drew was a fantastic scorer. I don't know who you'd remove, but maybe they were overloaded at a forward slot. For a few years, they had Fast Eddie Johnson. He had some personal problems off the court, but he was an all-league scorer and defender, in probably just as good as Doc Rivers. So there's another player there. Other than that, I really, off the top of my head, I can't come up with a lot of Atlanta Hawks from the 70s or 80s or 90s, and that's where I'd probably be drawing from, because a lot of Keith Avalon's teams here, which I'm sure you got a lot of help picking with, a lot of the players are based on 90s, early 2000s, 2010s. They want to get a representative of the modern era, so you can actually shoot some three-pointers and things, which they didn't have earlier on. So either way, Hawks, pretty well done. Like I'd say, maybe John Drew would be the only one I could argue with. Let's move on to the Nets. New York, New Jersey, Brooklyn. I'd probably call them New Jersey myself, since they were there the most. But anyway, you got Richard Jefferson, very solid net. Joe Harris, a modern day net. I really don't know where he fits in exactly. I'm going to throw the guys down. Let's just throw the guys down. And we'll go Mike Jaminski, a very solid Nets player. I'm trying to think of Nets centers. I mean, Daryl Dawkins had a brief moment there. Billy the Whopper Paltz is most likely on San Antonio, and we will check that later. Spencer Dinwiddie, once again, modern day player. I don't even know that much about that guy. I don't even know if he, for a team is with the history of the Nets, you would think there'd be someone better than Dinwiddie for certain. Derek Coleman was a very hyped player in the early 90s. Unfortunately, his attitude was not incredible throughout his career. He was a well-liked player, but he kind of didn't take his job too seriously, and that did not help the Nets. Along with Kenny Anderson, a very talented player, just had he was a very good player, played for the Blazers even, and a good point guard. Buck Williams, certainly deserving, one of the all-time Nets. Keith Van Horn, sure, all-time net. He's a very solid player. Drazen Petrovic, a very short stint with the Nets. Incredible shooter, one of the best shooters maybe in the history of the game. Brook Lopez, once again, a modern-day net. I can't remember exactly how many seasons he played with them. Kerry Kittles had a good stretch of years as well. Jason Kidd, also a very good player, Hall of Famer, and Coach Kevin Lockery. Now, if you're thinking Nets, you got to go back in time to maybe the 70s champion Nets, and maybe someone like Larry Keane would probably be a Spur. Brian Taylor was fantastic. Super John Williamson was fantastic. Early 80s, you had players like Michael Ray Richardson, but Michael Ray might be a Knick, maybe not. If he's not, he could have been a Net as well. There's plenty of good players. Albert King, Bernard's brother, was solid. Bernard even played for the Nets. So there's a few guys there that I don't recognize as all-time great Nets, but nonetheless, you're not going to have problems with that Nets team, a very good team. I'm quickly going to move on to the Celtics here. They were obviously, we've already gone through all of these players. I didn't really come up with a lot of additional players that could be a Celtic. I think they did this one pretty well. They didn't. I think Ray Allen must be a Buck, and then you have KG, who's probably a Timberwolf. That type of thing. So we don't have to worry about this Celtics team. This Celtics team is way too good as it is. Moving on to the fellows from Cleveland, we got Craig Elo, which is a very interesting pick. I'm going to have some names from the 70s that could probably override Craig Elo and a couple of these guys. I've looked at them. Brad Doherty is fantastic. That's fine. Austin Carr, an original Cav. That's fine. Anderson Varejao should not be in this set. Probably no way, no how. That guy was just there kind of to fill a role. I mean, he's a role player. And if that was their aim, was to put some role players in with the superstars, they've done a good job with that. Tristan Thompson, once again, mediocre basketball player. He might have slipped onto an all-star team, actually. I probably shouldn't say too much about that, but Tristan, not that great a ball player. LeBron James, by contrast, one of the greats, still around. Can't believe he will not retire. 20 years of basketball. That's just incredible. Kyrie Irving, one of the most talented players. He's kind of has a 2-cent brain, but he's got the world-level basketball ability. I just love watching him play. I wish he would have stayed in Cleveland, and maybe he would have had more success with LeBron. Zydrunas Ilgauskas is certainly a great center. There are some 70s guys that I would have put on this team. Hot Rod Williams, another fantastic player, rest in peace. Mark Price did a little bit of everything, one of the purest shooters of all time. Larry Nance, not Larry Nance Jr., who also played with the Cavs, the original Larry Nance. This guy probably could have suited up with Phoenix as well. We got K-Love. K-Love could have gone over to his original team, T-Wolves. Was he T-Wolves? No, he was Grizzlies. But anyway, Kevin Love had a better career prior to Cleveland. I'm not sure why he's there. Tyronn Lue, that's fine. Put him there. Bill Fitch is obviously the better choice at coaching because he was there forever, and they actually were very successful under Bill. I don't know. They're just kind of thinking in the present right now. Next, we have the Charlotte Hornets, but this is not the original Charlotte Hornets. This is the Hornets that had moved around, and they renamed themselves when they moved back to Charlotte. And so I can't remember exactly the logistics there, but this is not the Chris Paul Charlotte Hornets. This is the Hornets that actually became, the Bobcats. It's the Bobcats, basically. When the Bobcats became a team, they said, Bobcats, that's stupid. So here we go. Cody Zeller, Maurice Williams, David Wesley, there's a name I recognize, Gerald Wallace, Kemba Walker, Emeka Okafor. You can only have so much history in a team that's less than 20 years old. Nicholas Batum, Blazer, still was playing last year. Muggsy Bogues, you can't forget Muggsy, one of the originals. And then you got Eldon Campbell, who was actually very good, traded for Kobe Bryant. He's no Kobe, but was very good. Del Curry, he's got a couple sons who can play a little bit of ball. He was a great shooter. Not an all-star, but a good player. Anthony Mason, another kind of underrated player, did all the dirty work. May he rest in peace. We got Larry Grandmama Johnson, one of the first stars in Charlotte history. And Alan Bristow is the coach. I can't remember who else they had as coach when they originally were successful. Once again, that's a newer, modern team. They're just naturally not going to be as good as some of these teams that are greater than 50 years old. So, Chicago Bulls, Bob Love, of course, that 70s Bulls team. Fantastic group of guys there. Joakim Noah. Now, I'm not sure why. They may not have a ton of centers, but let's see how this plays out. Scottie Pippen, all-world ability. Michael Jordan's wingman, fantastic player. Jerry Sloan, fantastic player, also the coach of the Jazz. That makes sense. Hard-nosed player, never gave up on defense. Coaching, never gave up, ever. Reggie Theus, UNLV, all-rookie team, near rookie of the year, I think. Very underrated player, very good team player, tall guard, kind of in the mold of a Magic Johnson-like player, and a good guy. So here we go. Tony Kukoc. And that's another forward. It's like I'd have to think of some more forwards that might fit better, but there's Luol Deng. The A-Train, of course, Hall of Famer. Steve Kerr, that's just a pick of favorite, I think, because Steve Kerr didn't average more than 8-9 points a game in any particular year in Chicago. There's MJ, Michael Jordan. I guess he deserves to make a team. And you got Kirk Heinrich, who had kind of a brief run with them. I think there's probably some other guards. And there's Ho Grant. Horace was a fantastic power forward. He has to be there. And, of course, Phil Jackson is the coach. As for the Bulls, I don't know. You could name a number of guys. I mean, the most prominent one that stands out to me is from the 70s, Norm Van Leer. And I think Chet the Jet Walker ended up as a Sixer. I would have probably put him as a Bull because he played more years there, and he had better years in Chicago. As far as centers go, you could have gone Tom Boerwinkle on this team. I mean, going Joakim Noah and a couple of those guys. There was a few holes in this one that you could have put other players in, and I'm surprised that some of those guys were selected for a team that's like 55 years old. Anyway, on to the next team. And here we have the Dallas Mavericks, a team that's about 45 years old, 43. Jason Terry, certainly a long-time Mav, so give him that. Dwight Powell, take him or leave him. I don't know much about Dwight Powell. I've seen a couple highlights of him, and I bet you there's someone else to take his spot. Dirk Nowitzki, of course, legendary, one of the greatest Mavs ever. Here we go. Devin Harris, once again, modern-day player. Derek Harper, a fantastic guard. Michael Finley could get you 15 to 25 points on any night. Mark Aguirre can get you 25 to 35 points on a given night. Rolando Blackman, that late 1980s team as they were developing, went from expansion to a competitive team. Those Aguirre and Blackman were the anchors. Here's Sean Bradley, another solid player. I'd have to think who else was a good center for the Mavericks. Unfortunately, Roy Tarpley had too many drug problems. He would have been on this team as well. Brad Davis, CBA, cast off. His career was hanging by a thread. Dallas rescued him. I think he's still in Dallas management today. What an amazing pickup. He was a great guard for the Mavericks. And big James Donaldson. And, of course, Daryl Dawkins was quoted as saying he'd named him American Tourister because his head was as big as a suitcase. But James Donaldson was a humongous man, and he'd take about 14 seconds to shoot a free throw as well while he was chewing gum, if you watch any of his highlights. And then there's some guy in the finals right now, Luka Doncic, and that's Doncic is a really, really all-around, everything you can see on his card. I think the downward arrows are offensive skills primarily. The star is power, and that gives him two-way ability on certain plays. These are defensive abilities, some smarts. He can play defense on defense, smart and spark on defense and offense. And, of course, Rick Carlisle is the coach. Good call for the Mavericks. Players on the Mavericks, I don't know who I would add to the team. I can't think of a lot of guys. They had a lot of struggles. There's not a lot of guys that even come to mind. I think they probably picked the Mavericks pretty darn well because there probably wasn't a lot of selection. There's someone out there, it's not Uwe Blab. It's not going to be someone like that. Fat Lever played the end of his career, part of his career with Dallas, but probably not. Steve Nash was a son. So a lot of those guys had moved on or spent a majority of their careers with other teams. So let's move on to the next team. Yanking out my Denver Nuggets. So let's see if we have any ABA influence in this one. And I already kind of showed you David Thompson, so you know that that's going to happen. Ty Lawson, I don't even really know how many years Ty was there. He was a fantastic ball player, though, and I think he did pretty good with Denver for quite a while. And then you got Nikola Jokic, who's shining bright, has a championship ring, snapped that 1967 through 2023 string of no titles, so give him credit. We got Dan the Man Issel, Denver Rocket, Denver Nugget, Kentucky Colonel, and there's some ABA influence there for sure. Alex English, fantastic scorer. I think he had the most points scored in the 1980s. Marcus Canby. Now, I can't remember did he have his best years in Denver? That's a good question for me. Carmelo obviously did. He was drafted right around when LeBron was drafted and had a long career. Great scorer. Fat Lever, triple threat, rebounds, assists, and points, steals, did it all. Andre Miller played for the Blazers as well, like Fat, and he was fantastic all around with Cleveland. He was good in Portland, had a 50-point game. Jamal Murray, very good guard, excellent player today. Dikembe Mutombo, you cannot forget him. I guess he must have played a bit in Denver compared to Atlanta. I'd have to check that out. But then there's Nene Hilario. And, of course, D.T. Skywalker Thompson, the most talented player. He, like Michael Jordan, just took the ball to the basket with authority and just could leap out of a building. And, of course, George Karl makes a good coach. You could have thrown him on... Could have thrown George Karl on Seattle, though. I mean, I could have done that, but I think they went with Lenny Wilkins. And I think, you also had Larry Brown for a few years and some great 60-plus win teams in the ABA with Denver. And let's go to Detroit, also known as Detroit. Got the Pistons. We can already predict as many Pistons games I've been playing. Dave Bing will definitely be on this team. That's all I can tell you. Here's Big Ben Wallace, underrated defender. I think he's a Hall of Famer, believe it or not. Isaiah Thomas, Hall of Famer, incredible player. Should have made the 92 Olympic team. And then Dennis Rodman. And everybody knows Dennis because he can rebound and defend. And he's an interesting man. Okay, Tayshaun Prince. I don't know how many years he put in Detroit, but he was part of that 2004 group who won the championship. Bob Lanier never won a title in Detroit, but was probably their best big man ever. And I say that with this guy coming up, Bill Laimbeer, who filled an incredible role with some championship teams. Bob Lanier, Bill Laimbeer, two very good players. Bailey Howell, Hall of Famer. He finished his career in Boston, but he must have had enough years in Detroit to get a card, and that's a very good pick for Keith Avalone and his team. There's Grant Hill before he broke his foot. It was fantastic. Larry Faust, a 1950s, 60s guy. Not many people know who Larry is. Joe Dumars, of course, backcourt mate of Isaiah. And there's Dave Bing, the mayor of Detroit. Just incredible player. Technically won a scoring title by scoring the most points in 67, 68. Great playmaker. Chauncey Bubba Billups, and he was a fantastic 2004 guy, coaching the Blazers now, and we're winning 21 games a year. Anyway, that doesn't reflect on him very well because we just tank every year. Detroit is done. And this will be one of my favorite teams when I was growing up, even though I'm from Portland. Nate the Great Thurmond. There he is. He's got the stars on power, reach, and smart, which means he's incredible on offense and defense there. And the blocks mean he's just specifically good on skill and spark on defense. Nate was an incredible defender, and guys like Kareem and Bill Walton and many others say he was very difficult to score against. Klay Thompson, super shooter. I'm sure that arc with an underline probably has something to do with making a three-pointer automatically. Jeff Mullins, before the three-point shot, a great guard, not to be confused with Chris Mullin. Jeff Mullins, Chris Mullin. Just remember that. Chris Mullin, Olympian, great shooter, great scorer, best shooting forward after Rick Barry left the team in the 70s. Neil Johnston, a big man, one of the early big men who was always in the scoring leaders prior to the Chamberlain years. Andre Iguodala got a card. Now, that's incredible because I guess he must have lasted there a little bit during that heyday. I read the Warriors book, and they really worked hard to pick him up and keep him stay under the cap. Very good role player. Paul Arizin, one of those players from the 50s and 60s that actually had a jump shot, a real jump shot, could score with the best of them. And as I had discussed with a friend, he left when the Philadelphia Warriors moved to San Francisco. Paul said, I'm staying here in Philadelphia. I've got a job, and I could play some Eastern Basketball Association games, and he did that, and he did just fine there, and he did not want to move out to the West Coast because that's not where he was from. He's toward the end of his career. Tim Hardaway, Run TMC, excellent playmaker, UTEP two-step, Rick Barry, my favorite player right there. What does he do? He's got the leap, grab, snag, free throws. He misses on 5. That's it. That's a 90% foul shooter for you, or 88%. Wilt the Stilt. I don't know if they classify this based on their 5 best seasons, or a block of time, or if it's an overall average stat. Who knows? Here's Wilt the Stilt. This is the man who has the power and the reach, and he's got stars on virtually everything. So this is one of the better cards you're going to see in the entire set. Wilt the Stilt scored 50.4 as a Philadelphia Warrior. Stephen Curry, yes. Arc, wow. He's kind of the outside shooting version. The greatest shooter, one of the greatest shooters of all time from deep. Draymond Green, part of that great team of guys. A little bit of an attitude. And Steve Kerr in the deck as a player and a coach. Next up is the Houston Rockets with Yao Ming dynasty. Didn't last too long in Houston because he was hurt, but what a fantastic player. He adapted to the American pro game very quickly. Very good player, great shooter, 7'6". And let's see, Rodney McRae, a number 3 pick the year that I think Sampson went number 1. What a draft for the dang Rockets for a couple of years there, getting Sampson and Olajuwon. Moses Malone, definitely best year as a Rocket. The player the Blazers let get away. He was all ours. We just did. Our cheap owner decided not to pay a little extra bucks to keep him on the roster. And boy, with even though we won a championship, Walton's body started to crumble. We sure could have used Moses in the middle to give Walton a lot more breaks. Here's Robert Horry, big shot Rob, a little overrated in my opinion, a good player, but he was on a lot of special teams that won championships. It's kind of like Steve Kerr getting a few extra championships just because you're on the greatest team. Played a key role, but Robert Horry, an average to above average player. James Harden can score with the best of them. Has a nose for the basket, let's just say that. Sam Cassell, very fun player to watch, as was Calvin Murphy, a great little man. Super shooter. Keem Olajuwon, one of the greatest. Robert Reed, a good forward guard. Kind of took Rick Barry out of his spot when Rick became a Rocket in his last couple seasons. Kenny the Jet. Kenny could shoot. Great athlete as well. Good dunker. Otis, my man, Thorpe. And we're going to finish with Rudy Tomjanovich, a fantastic forward and a fantastic coach. There are the Rockets. I can't think of too many guys on this Rocket team that shouldn't be there. I mean, from the 70s and 80s Rockets, Clyde the Glide is probably a Blazer, definitely a Blazer. So there's probably not a lot of holes on that Rocket team. I didn't reflect on anybody that might be missing. Oh, maybe Ralph Sampson. I think John Alexander said that. Ralph Sampson should be a Rocket. I could probably agree with that. And for this set of 6, we're going to go with the Pacers finally. Rick Smits for sure. Fantastic pick by them. Jermaine O'Neal. Another great trade for the Blazers. They got Dale Davis in the trade, and Jermaine became a star. Reggie Miller, top 75. Not a great defender, but he can shoot the lights out, much like a Steph Curry. George McGinnis. He was LeBron 1973, basically. He was basically a huge man with super speed. It didn't match. A guy that big shouldn't be that agile and be that fast, but George McGinnis could do it all. Pass, shoot, steal the ball, rebound the ball with authority. And he was a part of 2 championships in the Pacers 1970s, and they also carried them to a 3rd ABA Finals in 1975, but they didn't win. And he was playing with Billy Knight, so there's some good representation here, at least some representation of the ABA Pacers. So I'm very happy that Billy Knight's there, and I'm not wondering if we're going to have any of the big guys. I don't think we're going to have any like the Freddie Lewises or the Mel Daniels, but at least they got somebody. There's Mark Jackson, played a good ball under Larry Brown, I believe. Roy Hibbert had a few good seasons. Danny Granger can shoot. There's Paul George. I don't know why we've got Jeff Foster. He's not earning anything there, but maybe they needed a role player or a backup center. Vern Fleming was a fantastic overall guard. There's Dale. Dale and Jermaine both made the Pacer team, so even though they traded him away. And, of course, the coach is Larry Brown. You could have gone with Slick Leonard, who guided them to championships. I probably would have gone with that. But either way, Larry Brown's in there. And on to our next group of 6. All right, we're going to go with one of the league's most controversial and struggling teams. It's never really lived up to any expectation whatsoever. They definitely had the players. They just didn't have very good management. And I'm not trying to rip on Elgin Baylor. I will rip on Donald Sterling, of course. But either way, Clippers have had a lot of players come and go. They just haven't put it together. Of course, they were hampered by a Bill Walton injury during the 80s. And some racism during the late 2015 to 18 years. So I think they're documenting that on TV now. So anyway, Zubac, this center, I'm not sure if there's more centers. Let's go through this roster because this is the Buffalo Braves, the San Diego Clippers, and the Los Angeles Clippers combined here. Zubac as center. I'm not really sure. I'm thinking McAdoo, and I'm thinking, I think they got a couple of the others. There's Danny Manning. He was a first-round pick of theirs. Number 1 pick. Very good player. Big Bob, there we go, center and forward. Won 3 straight scoring titles in the 70s. Nader came on in the late 70s as a San Diego Clipper and won a rebound title, I believe, and was very, he would play whenever Bill Walton was injured, which is pretty much the whole couple of seasons Walton was there in the early years. Let's see. Randy Smith, definitely one of the great Buffalo Braves of all time. Ron Harper. Now, you can argue he should be a Cleveland Cavalier. You can argue, I don't think he was as great when he was suffered many knee injuries when he became a Laker and a Bull. So I wouldn't even put him on either of those teams. But Clippers or Cavaliers, either way works. And I was going to mention for those Cavaliers, I didn't really bring it up. There was Jim Jones at center. There was Campy Russell at forward. There was Bobby Bingo Smith at guard. There was plenty of other players that you could have put in place of Anderson Varejao. I don't understand exactly why they went with that, but that's going back a few teams. But either way, that just popped into my head. Elton Brand, fantastic player. Michael Cage, rebounding champion, grabbed like 30-something rebounds in a game. Jamal Crawford, I guess he's got to go on some team. A great secondary six-man type of player, fantastic crossover moves, similar to like a Tim Hardaway or even a Kyrie Irving. Just very, very great one-on-one ball player. Blake Griffin, good player and not a fantastic shooter, but he had a long career because of his athleticism. Lob City here with the Clippers. DeAndre Jordan, very good defensive player and not a good foul shooter. That's all I remember about him. Great rebounder. Corey Maggette drew a lot of fouls per minute played, as I recall. And a good forward guard, swingman type, one of the last swingman types you see around here. But, of course, there's really no positions in today's game. They all play all positions. So, Coach Doc Rivers, Buffalo, who did they have? They had Jack Ramsey in the 70s for a little bit. Doc has a good reputation as a coach, though, so I can see that happening. I was trying to think of other players that would be on the other Clippers. I mean, you could have gone with Michael Brooks, or I think there's an earlier edition of this game when Lloyd Vaught's on the team, and Lloyd was a pretty good player during some losing seasons in Clipperland. Let's move on to a team that has a rich history. And it's the Los Angeles Lakers. They've got this guy who may have the best card in the entire set of cards. I mean, everything's got some work there. Reach, smart, sparker, all stars, quick as starred. And he's an offensive juggernaut with skill and power. So he pretty much does everything offensively. So, that's going to be a weapon. This team's going to be hard to beat with that guy in the middle. And, of course, Elgin Baylor does pretty much everything as well. A great small forward size who rebounds like a power forward. Kobe Bryant, don't need to say too much about him. Pretty much all-around player and a multi-time champ. AC Green, good role player at Oregon State University. I'm a little surprised he's there, but maybe I don't know if they don't have Happy Harrison, I bet. And Happy was much better rebounding-wise than AC Green. But AC was on the Showtime Lakers along with this guy who's pretty good, a great passer, Magic Johnson. Can't say enough about that guy. Michael Cooper, fantastic defender and a three-point threat for the era he was. He didn't take a lot of threes. And Lamar Odom, he has some personal troubles throughout, but I don't know. There's probably somebody that could take his place on the team. Let's see, in the 70s, who did that? I don't know. Would Cassie Russell be a player? I'm not really sure, but there's got to be someone that probably was slightly better than Lamar Odom. And Byron Scott, fantastic. They traded away Norm Nixon to get him. And Nixon, I don't know if he's in this set or not, but he should be a Laker as well, along with, of course, the logo Jerry West. Does everything well. This team is loaded. This team is ridiculous. And then there's Jamal Wilkes, who was a fantastic Laker receiver of many Magic Johnson backdoor passes. Jammin' James Worthy, of course, is incredible. Finally, the greatest player of the first half of the 20th century, George Mikan, who won a few championships as a Minneapolis Laker. And Pat Riley has to be the coach. Definitely right up there with the best. There was some stat that was saying that Pat Riley was involved with like 25% of all NBA championships in the history of the league or something, because he was a Laker for so long, and then he's won a few with the Heat. So anyway, here we go. Hassan Whiteside, a modern-day player. Kind of interesting they threw him in there, but that gives you some modern-day feel. I don't know. Miami is still a young team, so maybe they didn't have a lot of centers to choose from. Dwayne Wade, obviously, just, Michael Jordan-esque in many ways. I knew this guy was going to be good from the day he stepped on a basketball court, especially in the pros. Just like Clyde Drexler, I knew he'd be good. Just incredible talent. And just working on your shot a little bit turned you into super, super talent. Ronnie Cycli, a very solid center, one of the early centers in Miami. Glenn Rice, super shooter. Fantastic player. Grant Long, a role player, not super great, but definitely played there a long time. Alonzo Mourning was an incredible player, of course. Bam Adebayo is one of their newest super players. Very good player. I think the Blazers wanted to try to pick him up, but he was very, very expensive. Chris Bosh, very tough player, played with LeBron and Dwayne Wade on those championship teams. They assembled a dream team. Jimmy Butler can play some serious ball. Very good clutch player. And Mario Chalmers, not to be confused with Superintendent Chalmers. This guy could play some ball, but he really kind of did it in a limited role. I think he's on the team because they have a limited history. And Udonis Haslem, he's been there almost the entire history of the Miami Heat, from what I can recall. He played forever. And let me know if he's still there. And there's Eddie Jones, a fantastic player, former Laker. Very good shooting guard, very fast, got a lot of steals. And, of course, Eric Spoelstra is the only choice you can have for the Miami Heat. Oh, did I say Heat? It's Heat. It's fun to make fun of Miami when they're not doing well. Now we've got the Bucks, the modern-day Bucks here. Let's see who we got. We got a 70s player in Marcus Johnson. I like it. Marcus Johnson, UCLA, fantastic player. He should be in the Hall of Fame. I mean, he's got the all-around game of Tracy McGrady and many others, a very versatile forward. He was playing against Dr. J and all the greats during the 1970s and 80s, and he was right up there with the top of them. Bobby Dandridge finally made the Hall of Fame after about 40 to 45 years. Long overdue. He was still alive to receive the trophy, so that's good. Very good forward. Played with Lou Alcindor, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Ray Allen can shoot the daylights out. There's no reason why he shouldn't be in the Hall of Fame. And Giannis. Tons of good stuff there. And a championship ring. Obviously deserves it. Junior Bridgman, a very good role player. Terry Cummings, another great forward. Drafted by the Clippers. He could have been a Clipper forward as far as I'm concerned. This, I hear, was a sentimental pick. Randy Breuer, I don't know if he went to the University of Minnesota. Randy Brewer's game is just ugly. He has an ugly looking shot. He plays ugly looking defense, but at the same time, he filled a role for the Milwaukee Bucks for a number of years. I don't know if he's a top 3 center on their team of all time, but it sounded like it was a sentimental pick. So Good for you, Randy Breuer, in your 7-3 weird geeky game. Chris Middleton, fantastic shooter, product of the modern era, really good three-point bomber. And there's Sid Moncrief, could do it all. Great defense, great offense, drew a lot of fouls. In his prime, Ricky Pierce, another six-man supreme, did that in Seattle and Milwaukee. Paul Pressey, one of those first point forwards, could play guard and forward, really could pass the ball, move the ball. Not a great shooter, but did everything else well. Andrew Bogut, injuries were the only thing that kept him from being better. And Coach Don Nelson, another good pick for Coach, because Don was there when they lost Abdul-Jabbar and they had to rebuild the team, and he did a great job. Don just hangs out in Hawaii now, from what I hear, and enjoys it over there. So anyway, probably got a private island. We're here with the Grizzlies and Shane Battier, one of the better all-around players. Does nothing spectacular, but does everything good. You can't go wrong with Shane. Marc Gasol, played forever. Desmond Bane, a very recent player, Memphis. Good shooter, good modern-day player, fits the modern game really well. Tony Allen, really good player. I don't know if he's probably in the top 12 of Memphis all time. This is another young team. Sharif Abdur-Rahim, fantastic player, played for Portland at the end of his career. Lionel Hollins got the coaching call, and I'm not really sure how accurate that is, but I'm happy for Lionel to at least have a card in this set, because he didn't make the Blazers, which we haven't done yet, so you'll find that out later. Zach Randolph, another Blazer. Great draft pick. Ja Morant. Get his head on straight. He could be a Hall of Famer, but right now he's kind of in limbo. Mike Miller, good shooter. They're looking for players, though. He's kind of one-dimensional. There's Jaren Jackson Jr. He's got a future. He's still young. His dad was a good player, too. Rudy Gay, fantastic player. Pau Gasol and Marc Gasol on the same team, the brothers. That's crazy. And Mike Conley Jr., a great point guard. I think he's still toiling around in the NBA. We got one team left in this six-pack. The Minnesota Timberwolves. And it's going to be Andrew Wiggins, which makes some sense. He's signed for a lot of bucks in Golden State. You might see a little paper fleck once in a while off these cards, because I just corner rounded all of them, and they're probably still pretty fresh. Doug West, solid forward in the early years. Karl Anthony Towns, great big man, everybody knows, great player. Sam Mitchell was one of the originals, very good player, broadcaster now. Rubio just retired. I think he's had too many injuries. Wally Zerbiak on the broadcast team, a great shooter. Leitner, one of the greatest winners in college basketball history. A decent NBA player, made an all-star game or two, but he kind of had a little bit of an attitude, rubbed the wrong way with some coaches. Terrell Brandon from Portland, Oregon. Very underrated player. Injuries kind of got the best of him, but he's only like 5'11", so a lot of might out of that smaller than typical body for an NBA player. Tom Gugliotta, good all-around player. Kevin Garnett, one of the greatest players in the modern era. Great. Didn't have a three-point shot necessarily, but boy, he could do virtually everything else as a big man. I mean, he's perfect for the 90s and early 2000s and things like that, but his range wasn't incredible, but he could do almost everything. Anthony Edwards is grand. And Georgie Deng, I know nothing about. So he must have been there in the last 10 years, I'm guessing. I have no idea. Flip Saunders, the late and great Flip Saunders, is the coach. So that takes care of most of the T-Wolves. I can't come up with any new guys for Minnesota. That's a tough team because they're so modern. All right, our list is dwindling down here. We're down to we still got a few teams left. New Orleans Pelicans, originally Charlotte Hornets, I believe. They went from Charlotte to New Orleans. And so here we go with the Pelicans. I don't know some of these guys. Herbert Jones is kind of new to me. Ryan Anderson's another player. P.J. Brown. Takes a lot to shut me up, but I don't understand. I know P.J. played for the Nets for a while. Tyson Chandler was a decent big man for a while. There's Anthony Davis. He wishes he's probably in Los Angeles, but he is going to have to anchor the Pelicans in any of these super battles. Baron Davis, good all-around player when he was in shape. I think he got out of shape during one of the lockout years, and I don't know if he ever totally recovered from that. Eric Gordon, a good shooter. Chris Paul, obviously a defensive genius playmaker, has been playing forever. Brandon Ingram, he's one of the modern day super players for them. He's kind of like carrying them when they need him. Jrue Holiday, he's a good player as well at the point. He's got his brother, at least two brothers playing in the professional ranks. David West was always a good big guy. And of course, Zion Williamson. As long as his body stays together, he is a tremendous offensive player, and he draws a lot of fouls. It's the ref call with the star with the circle around it means he draws a lot of fouls. And Alvin Gentry, one of the early guys for the New Orleans Pelicans. Let's take a look at the Knicks. The Knicks, of course you're going to have Walt Frazier. Incredible player, underrated player, would play well in any era. And possibly the greatest Knick. Okay, now you can discuss. Patrick Ewing, another tremendous pick. Lucky lottery pick. Everyone's jealous when Dave DeBusschere, the GM at the time, got that pick. Dave DeBusschere, one of the great defensive players and all-around players. Also Hall of Famer Bill Bradley, a senator. Still around, he's like 81. Dick Barnett just got elected to the Hall of Fame. Finally, took a while, got in there. Harry Gallatin, a 50s and 60s player that not many people know, but was also a good big man. Red Holtzman, of course, is going to be the guy who guided the team to their last championship in 1973. Boy, that's a long time between titles. My Blazers, 1977, so I can't say much either. Allen Houston, great offensive guard. Bernard King had a little streak there where he was just the king of New York. Earl the Pearl Monroe, fantastic. Shake and bake. Man of 1,000 moves. Great scorer. Charles Oakley, just powerful. Excellent rebounder. Loved him. He started out with the Bulls. I almost could have put him on the Bulls. I think he had a couple good years there before he went to New York. Willis Reed, the captain. An amazing player. And, of course, John Starks. He was quite a streak shooter, so I'm not really sure. There might be some other guards out there. I don't see Michael Ray Richardson here. I don't see Ray Williams here. From the 70s, it was Frazier and Monroe for the most part in the 70s. I can't think of too many in the 80s. I don't think Rory Sparrow deserves it, but he's right up there with Starks as far as all-around player go. Played him many times in fast break basketball, and when you play a player enough in fast break basketball, you realize how good a player really is, right? Okay, Detlef Schrempf. This is truly, the Thunder's truly the Seattle Supersonics, since they spent 40 plus years in Seattle. So even though I've got the Thunder OKC label on this, I'll be playing them as the Seattle Supersonics. Schrempf, Sonic, great player. Gus the Wizard Williams, champion, Sonics. Gary Payton, finals twice in a row, Sonics. Sam Perkins, Sonics. Jack Sigma, Sonics. Russell Westbrook, was he a Sonic? Nah, he's an OKC guy. Freddie Downtown Brown, easily a Sonic. Kevin Durant, originally a Sonic. And Dale Ellis, Seattle Supersonics. Serge Ibaka, now there's a Thunder guy. I'll give him that. Sean Kemp, Sonics. Shard Lewis, Sonics. And finally, Lenny Wilkins, Sonics. So this is truly the Sonics out here. Any guys missing from Seattle? I don't know. The Sonics had John Johnson in the 70s and the 80s. Xavier McDaniel. I don't know exactly what happened there. McDaniel, Tom Chambers may be his son, so we'll look for that. But there were some good players on that team with Peyton, Nate McMillan. Could have been put on the team as a role player, but they had Freddie Brown, Gus Williams, so maybe not. But I'm guessing most of those are pretty good. They did represent the 70s Sonics and early 80s Sonics really well. Orlando Magic, still a relatively new team. Nick Anderson, this is the 90s team that went to the finals and got swept by the Rockets. That's Nick Anderson, the nickel or the penny. Hardaway, very good player. Dwight Howard, the future center, after Shaq, good player. Tracy McGrady, when he wasn't hurt, was a very good player. Very good all-around player. Jameer Nelson, little modern-day player. Shaq. Shaq's just Shaq. You lucky that they got Shaq, and Shaq, there wasn't enough room for him on the Lakers, obviously. Vucevic, another good shooter. Hedo Turkoglu. And that shows their kind of expansion because that's kind of not a great player, but a good player. But some of these teams will be more interesting to play because they're not going to be chock full of superstars. These cards, if you notice, right below the Orlando where Turkoglu is, that's typically where there's a, whether I'm a starter or I'm not a starter player, or I'm a part-time starter player. Well, all these guys are considered starters, so they just wiped out for this special all-time greats franchise teams. They did not put that rating there. In addition, there's usually an icon or a veteran or a star, or some kind of rating down in this corner, which shows how much experience they have. Well, all these players are all-time teams players, so they eliminated that for this particular set too. So if you're playing regular teams, that's another rule that you'd have to learn. But I'm going to be playing these guys for a little while, so I don't have to worry about it. Scotty Skiles, point guard extraordinaire, has like a 29 assist game. There's Dennis 3D Scott, fantastic shooter. JJ Redick, fantastic shooter. And he likes to talk a lot and is not always telling the truth about today's former players, if you know what I mean. Bo Outlaw, one-dimensional, good rebounder, good defender. He can't shoot a lick. He can make a dunk, though. He could always shoot 55% on dunks. And Stan Van Gundy, the coach of Orlando. I can't think of any other guys that should be on Orlando. I'd rather really go in my data banks. I don't know the expansion teams as well, but there's probably somebody there that probably would fit in place of a couple of those guys. Okay, here's Philadelphia. They have a coach, Billy Cunningham. I do believe they will have a player, Cunningham, so look out for that. Dr. J, of course, you could have put him on the Nets. If you're going historically, he had his best years with the Nets. 2 championships, scoring titles, better net. And so I think Mark Herman would appreciate that comment. Here's Joel Embiid. Fantastic player. Thinks he's better than Chamberlain. He's not. Billy Cunningham, the player. Fantastic jumping kangaroo kid. Maurice Cheeks, one of the worst players in the Hall of Fame. I'm not going to say because he's a bad player. He's a great player. Turnover-free, efficient, high percentage shooter. Not a Hall of Famer, in my opinion, along with a bunch of other guys. But it's a judgment call. And I love Maurice Cheeks. Fantastic guy. Fantastic player. Charles Barkley. It's Tracy McGrady, too. I don't think he's a Hall of Famer in my book either. Didn't play on enough winning teams. Injured too much. Just traveled between team to team. Charles Barkley. There's a fantastic player. That guy is... You see him on TNT, and he's just that goofy, bald-headed announcer, but he is one of the finest players for his size, at his position of all time. He could cross any generation. He would be great in any era. Rebounding-wise, incredible. Inside scoring, drawing the foul, and making the shot. No one was better in his time. Hersey Hawkins, definitely a shooter. Not incredible in anything else, but a very good, efficient player from the outside. Allen Iverson, a gunner. A little bit overrated in my book because he just gunned. Gun. He does an incredible athlete, does a lot for his size, but not an efficient player. Took him to the finals once, though, so there you go. There's Bobby Jones, fantastic defender player. You could put him on Denver if he fit. Very good Denver Nugget. Steve the Mixer Mix played there forever. Dolph Shays used to be the NBA's all-time leading scorer. Finished with just less than 20,000 points. Good two-handed shooter. And a foul shooting champ. Chet the Jet Walker just passed away. May he rest in peace. Fantastic. Back you in, put the basket in, draw the foul. Good player. Played with Wilt. And Hal Greer, longtime Sixer. Underrated defender. And look at all the stars he's got right there. So that's a really good player. He also has a asterisk there for the ref rating as well. I just did a look up in the rules. The Highlight Maker Hoops Primetime Rules booklet here. And a burst, this little symbol down here for Hal Greer, is a most likely to foul type rating. So that's not necessarily a good rating. He's actually a little bit of a fouler. So I found that interesting. I was trying to look it up because I knew that some of them, they will have a circle or something and they'll say most likely to draw a foul. This is the opposite. This is a guy that's most likely to foul. So it's just an overall barometer of whether they draw fouls or whether they foul. So that's interesting way to classify your fouling abilities. I really do like that aspect. Hopefully it comes through in the game once I get a game under my belt. Here we have the Suns. They are coached by John McLeod, obviously, and that is the proper coach. He coached them to the 76 finals, and he was a fantastic coach. I mean, you could have put Paul Westphal there or something, but that wouldn't have been right. So here comes Walter Davis, my favorite Sun probably of all time. And then Tom Chambers, the double pump dunk that he can do on Lakers versus Celtics on the Sega Genesis is classic. You got to look that up. I'll probably put a link in the description. It defies gravity. Okay, Devin Booker scored over 70 points in a losing effort one game a few years back. He's definitely good. And this one's kind of puzzling to me. You tell me if I'm incorrect on this, but Danny Ainge was a good coach and GM. Wasn't he coaching with the Phoenix Suns? But he played very little with the Phoenix Suns. It was one of his last years, and he was a backup, and I'm just wondering if it's a sentimental pick to put him in this set of cards, because he scored close to 20 points a game with the Sacramento Kings, which would be the ideal spot for him. And we'll get to Sacramento and see who their guards are, but you would think Danny would have been replaced easily by other players, but maybe someone was just a huge Danny Ainge fan, and he deserves to be in this set somewhere. He could have been with the Celtics as one of their guards, as far as I'm concerned, but they had Sharman, Sam Jones, and some really good players as well, Dennis Johnson. So it's interesting. That's a very interesting pick of Danny Ainge, a very little used guard for the Suns. Amari Stoudemire and Alvin Adams. Adams in the 70s, Amari in the 2000s. Both really good players. Adams a better passer. Amari a better inside scorer, high percentage shooter. KJ, Kevin Johnson, highly skilled player in the early 1990s. What a pest that guy was. If he was healthy, he was right up there with Magic Johnson as far as being an offensive dynamo. Just a small version. Steve Nash, speaking of small guards that can score, another ACC Santa Clara player, just incredible. How far he came and how much he got out of that small body of his, couple MVPs. Incredible Phoenix guard. Big mistake by the Dallas Mavericks, getting rid of that guy. Dan Marley, Thunder Dan, fantastic player. Outside range, can really pop it, kind of streaky. Sean Marion with the one of the most interesting field goal releases. I think my jump shot right now kind of looks like Sean Marion's, but he can make it, and he was 6'10", and he can really do a little bit of everything. Then we got Paul Westphal, who was incredible. He actually coached the team and almost took him to a title in 1993. Paul Westphal, may he rest in peace, fantastic player. Another Pac-10 guy, Pac-8. Jeff Hornacek, he could do it all as well. Played well with KJ, played well with Stockton in Utah. Can't complain about this group of guys. I'm looking back. I don't see. Am I just wrong here that Connie the Hawk Hawkins should have a spot here? And you're missing out on a piece of history. I mean, you could easily have taken Marley or Marion out of here. I think Connie the Hawk was an overlooked player, but once again, it's the 1970s. Not as much data. He's a Hall of Famer. He was incredible. Before I go to the final section of teams, I was just going to let you know I picked up this book on eBay. I've been looking at it for a couple of years. It's by Jim O'Brien, a fantastic writer of basketball, especially ABA basketball. It's called ABA All-Stars, came out around 1972, and it talks about 30 of the greatest ABA All-Stars, and I was hoping for more representation of those All-Stars in this set of cards, and I think they're coming up a little short. As you can see on the cover here, that's Charlie Scott right there, and he did not make either the Celtics nor the Suns, and I think he probably should have made the Phoenix Suns over Danny Ainge easily. I didn't even think about that. Dan Issel, fantastic player. Rick Barry obviously is going to make the team. The back has Mel Daniels. He probably should have been put on the Pacers. John Brisker, he played a minute for the Sonics, but he didn't play well in the NBA. Dr. J. Zelmo Beatty he played very well for the Hawks. You could have easily made him a Hawk center. Artis Gilmore, obviously a very good, great, made the Bulls. Charlie Scott didn't make it. Barry, Rick Mount didn't play much. Didn't play long periods of greatness. Neither did Jim McDaniels. But at the same time, I just liked using that as a quick reference guide. And there's Jim O'Brien right there. This thing is just a fantastic little book. I've just got it today in the mail. So it's a little yellowed on the outside, but the pages inside look very nice. So I can't wait to look at this book and take a look at the stars. Jim O'Brien. I read a lot about him stuff. He covered the ABA so closely, and there you have the whole list of ABA players right there. Barry, Beatty, Brisker, Roger Brown. Why isn't Roger Brown in an Indiana uniform? Jumpin' Joe Caldwell, Pogo Joe, Matt Calvin, Larry Cannon, Glenn Combs, Louis Dampier, the originator of the three-point shot, basically. I mean, he could have been stuffed somewhere. San Antonio, if anywhere. Daniel should have been in there. Irving, Freeman, Gilmore, Hawkins. That's missing. I haven't seen Spencer Haywood. He must have made the Supersonics, right? And no, he did not. He did not make the Oklahoma City Thunder. Why is Haywood not in here? Once again, arguments ensue. So it's always the fun part. I'm not mad. I'm just like looking at players here that should make it. Ralph Simpson, George Thompson, Charlie Willie Wise was a fantastic player at the Utah Stars, but did nothing in the NBA. So some of these guys are justified not being on a team, but at the same time, fun stuff, looking at old history and trying to compare it with what they pick as an all-time team. A lot of history gets lost in this entire thing. So let's go with the Portland Trailblazers, and there's Rod Strickland. Rod was a fantastic guard. He kind of had some attitude, some running problems, some personal problems here and there. But as a pure playmaker, there was not many players that were better at getting the ball all the way to the basket and either putting it in or finding someone for a nice, easy jump shot. So Rod Strickland was very good. The Blazer point guards of the decade, let's get through the team. We'll see if there's anyone missing. I am glad they did throw Arvydas Sabonis in here, even though he was toward the end of his playing career, playing overseas. It's Lithuania's greatest player of all time, and his son, obviously, who was born in Portland, Oregon, by the way, Tomas Sabonis. And we had our opportunities to pick up Domantas. Domantas is a fantastic player too, but Arvydas was special passer, special shooter, just a good guy too, good player, and I'm glad he got to play with us as long as he did. Jack Ramsey, obviously one of the great coaches of all time, just a very great general manager, fun announcer back in the day. So I'm glad we have Dr. Jack, the championship team coach. Sheed, if you're still here listening to this stuff, kudos to you. I hope you're enjoying some of this. It's just fun to look at these players. And Sheed kind of had attitude too, but at least he was an all-star with Portland. That makes sense. Brandon Roy, the woulda, coulda, shoulda been a star for many, many years, but his knees, as we even knew when he was at the University of Washington, they were not good. His knees were pretty much shot by the end of college. So the years that we got out of him, that's probably as good as it's going to get. Terry Porter, fantastic underrated guard. If Maurice Cheeks deserves the Hall of Fame, Terry Porter should be right there knocking at the door. C.J. McCollum, very creative scorer, still in the NBA. Sad to see him go, but the team was going nowhere. And the same can be said for Damian Lillard, who was reaching the end of his line in Portland. Now he's a Buck. Can shoot. They just should have a shot that says logo or something like that, and make it a three-pointer from midcourt. And there's Bill Walton. May he rest in peace. Beautiful basketball player. That's all I'm going to say. I've already mourned Walton so much I can't believe he passed away. Clifford Robinson, Uncle Cliffy. Loved Uncle Cliffy. Great sixth man. Jerome Kersey. Another great scrappy ball player. May he rest in peace, along with Cliffy. They both died way too young. And then you got Clyde the Glide Drexler, obviously an incredible player, and LaMarcus Aldridge. My only argument here is Maurice Lucas deserves a slot on this team. Maurice was so incredible, an all-star, all-league player. And that should have been, if you're throwing Randy Breuer on some team, you got to throw Maurice Lucas on the Blazers, or Danny Ainge on the Suns. You got to have Maurice Lucas on the Blazers. There needs to be a specially made Maurice Lucas card, and that may just be because I'm a true Blazer fan. Born in Portland. All right, next. Sacramento Kings. Coach Rick Adelman. This is Sacramento Kings, Kansas City Kings, Cincinnati Royals. This is a whole group of history here. These guys have been around since basically 1950 or so, almost the beginning of the team. I can't remember where they were prior to Cincinnati. There was another team there, I think another version of the team that won a championship. Their only championship. I don't think it's a Cincinnati Royals. It could be someone else. Jerry Lucas, Cincinnati Royal. Tiny Archibald, Kansas City King, fantastic player. Mike Bibby, 90s. DeMarcus, attitude, but a good player. Vlade, 1990s team that went to the finals, kept losing to the Lakers or early 2000s. Sam Lacey, very solid player in the 70s. He played with Scotty Wedman. Mitch Richmond was on a lot of questionable, very mediocre teams. Much better in Golden State when he played with Mullen and Hardaway. Oscar Robertson, you can't say much more about him. He's just great, incredible player. Peja Stojakovic, incredible range. What a tough guy. That guy, he can create his own outside shot with the best of them. Jack Twyman, fantastic player, great foul shooter, fantastic all around small forward, scored a lot of points with the Cincinnati Royals. And Chris C. Weber. Is there anybody else I could think on this team? Sacramento, did they throw Phil Ford on this team? I didn't remember turning that card over. Phil Ford was a fantastic player for a few years. Who else did they have in the 1980s or 70s? They had some good players. I wouldn't put Bill Robinson on the team or some of the other guys, but Otis Birdsong, where's he? Otis, my man, that guy can really fill it up. Excellent player, all-star player as well. So once again, the controversy and the arguments ensue. Before I get to my last four teams, I'm just going to pop out these guys because this is kind of I made the Eastern and the Western Conference packets because I got a couple extra labels I glued in here, and they're just referees, and I don't know all of these referees, but I know some of them. Mark Davis, Dick Bavetta, of course, Bennett Salvatore. We got Richie Powers, Monty McCutcheon, Eddie T. Rush, James Capers, Dan Crawford, Jess Kersey, Zach Zarba, Joe Forte, Ed Malloy, Bob Delaney, and Steve Javy. Some people don't like Javy. Blazer announcer Mike Rice got kicked out of a game by Steve Javy, so that was always a funny thing. You got to be pretty intense to get kicked out as a broadcaster. Okay, we got Mendy Rudolph, Joey Crawford, Leon Wood, former NBA. He scored 30-plus points a game at some California school. Didn't really come through. He was a three-point bomber in the NBA, but he didn't play that much. Michael Smith, Sean Corbin. I don't know all of these. Bill Spooner, Tom Washington, Kenny Maurer, Violet Palmer, one of the first female referees, Daryl Garrettson, Tony Brothers, Scott Foster. He gets a little bit of flack. Hugh Evans. He's not Tim Donaghy, but he's close. Talking about Scotty Foster. Hugh Evans. Haywood Workman. Former NBA player, has to be. I didn't know that. Dee Cantor, female. And Earl Strom. So there's roughly, I think, 30 referees. I'm not sure there. That's probably what it is. But I had to use two packets to make that one work. And now for the final four teams. Let's go real quickly here. We got San Antonio. See if there's anybody controversial. I hope there's a Billy Paultz in here. There probably isn't. But I was hoping there would be. Avery Johnson, a very good guard with the Duncan Robinson years. Kawhi Leonard, modern day. Patty Mills snuck onto this team. That should be Louis Dampier. Patty Mills, great guard. Not an incredible guard, though. But, of course, Louis Dampier was pretty mediocre, I guess, by the time he reached San Antonio. He was much older. Matt Bonner, why? There's got to be somebody instead of Matt Bonner. Bruce Bowen, defensive skill set's great, and a three-point shot. Tim Duncan, Obviously, no explanation necessary there. Sean Elliott, very good player. The Iceman, legendary scorer. His shot thing is all full of ratings, so he's going to score a lot of points. Manu Ginobili, of course, he can do plenty of defensive things and score. And Pop, still there. David Robinson, no question, one of the best. Tony Parker and Danny Green. Once again, where's Larry Keenan? Where's Billy Paltz? Where is... I can come up with a few more. I just don't understand why there's some of the key guys, even from the late 70s, when this Spurs team was still very, very good. You know, Captain Late Silas, you could make an argument for that. But anyway, once again, it's always up for debate when you're coming up with all-time great teams. Toronto Raptors. All-time great team. Fred VanVleet, a younger team. Once again, I didn't know he had that much of a legacy, but I know he was pretty good. Jonas Valanciunas. Once again, I've seen him play a few times. Big, husky Euro center. Pascal Siakam, once again, a talented player. Morris Peterson, he had a good streak of years. Kyle Lowry, good guard. Amir Johnson, modern day, I believe. Anunoboy, probably mispronounced that one. Chris Boucher. Jose Calderon, European player, Spanish player, or was he Dominican Republic? Very good player, very good shooter. Vince Carter, of course, has some of the talents of Michael Jordan, but just, once again, mental makeup, not the same. That's saying a lot, though. He's just a shade below. Doug Christie. I think, knitted his own clothes. One fact, when he was in Sacramento, I knew that. DeMar DeRozan. And DeMar can score. Yeah, he's a good player. And Nick Nurse. Once again, I don't know who the coaches were. I couldn't name 3 coaches for the Toronto Raptors in their team history. Heading on to Utah. And let's see if we got the players we need. This is New Orleans Jazz, Utah Jazz. So we got 2 teams. Once again, there's no Jazz in Utah. I don't know. I'm glad they didn't change their name, though. Andrei Kirilenko, AK-47. That was his number. So they always called him AK-47. Could do a lot of shot blocking, do a lot of interesting things. Rudy Gobert, good defender. A little bit of a head case, but a good player. Adrian Dantley, he can score. He can draw the foul. He's got the star with the circle and the underline, which I think that means almost every case he's going to draw the foul on a play. He's a huge foul drawer, 30-point-a-game scorer in his prime. Derek Favors, pretty solid player. Mark Eaton, there's probably some players here. Once again, why are they there and some others not? There's Carl, the mailman, Malone, obviously, Hall of Famer. Pistol Pete Maravich, obviously perfect for this Jazz team. Paul Millsap, very solid, mostly a reserve, I think. Brian Russell, and the victim of the shove. And then, of course, John Stockton can pass with the best of him. Deron Williams, a good scorer. A little attitude issue there. Jerry Sloan, incredible coach. And Thurl Bailey. So are we missing anybody from the 70s or the 80s? I don't know. The New Orleans Jazz just did not have a lot of stars. I mean, by the 80s, it was Adrian Dantley, Ricky Green, and Darrell Griffith. There you go. Darrell Griffith probably is a missing link to this Utah Jazz team. And I probably can come up with more if I really wanted to. They could have put Hornacek over on this team without a problem and threw Charlie Scott on the Phoenix Suns. That's probably the one thing I probably would have argued for. Finally, the Washington Bullets / Baltimore Bullets / Washington Wizards, which is one of the goofiest names I've seen. They just didn't want to affiliate anything with Bullets, which were bullet trains, not bullets out of guns, but kids don't know that. Dick Motto was the coach, fantastic coach. Walt Bellamy, good battles with Wilt Chamberlain in the 60s, but that's Baltimore Bullets right there. Marcin Gortat did not realize he was that valued when you have Elvin Hayes and Wes Unseld and Mitch Kupchak, and who else did you have at center? Greg Ballard at forward, solid forward. There's probably some other ones too. We did have Bobby Dandridge, Bullet, who is going to be representing the Bucks, so that you can't have 2 cards. Jeff Malone, Is there any other guards? Like, you could have thrown like was Gene Shue a bullet? Maybe, I don't know. I'm trying to think of the other guards that historically were on this team. Anton Jameson can score. Juwan Howard, a good power forward, played forever. The Biggie, Elvin Hayes, Brendan Haywood. Once again, no Spencer Haywood in this set, but we got Brendan Haywood, who's half as good. And we got John Wall, did a lot of good things. Trying to think who else there is. Bradley Beal, a little bit of an attitude, but a good scorer. Once again, attitude. Gilbert Arenas and Wesley Unseld, very good. Trying to think who else. Phil Chenier. I could have said Phil Chenier on the Bullets. Other players, like I said, Mitch Kupchak was a good reserve. I mean, you could have had more fun than Gortat and put Manute Bull on this team to honor that incredible streak of shot blocking seasons that he had. But either way, that's the way it goes, and I'm sure there's more players I could come up with. Anyway, there you have it for a episode previewing the teams, the franchise great teams in Highlight Maker Hoops Primetime Edition. And also, these cards also are compatible with the original Highlight Maker Hoops Edition, the shortened version of the game, the first installment. And overall, some pretty good picks. I noted some of the oddities and some of the weirdness, and like Danny Ainge, Randy Breuer, those type of guys. But overall, this is going to be a fun set to play with. I can't wait to get a couple games started, and I will certainly share them with you. So for today, this is Rod signing out from Rod's Tabletop Hoops.